The helicopter's downwash smelled of scorched metal and ripped the white cloths right off the reunion patio tables. 300 former classmates staggered back from the glare of the landing lights while my younger sister stood frozen under the hotel awning, one shoe gone, champagne soaking the front of her red gown. Only 5 minutes earlier, Chloe Cole had been clutching the Distinguished Alumni Trophy, informing the entire room that I had spent 2 decades running from responsibility. Now, a Blackhawk was settling onto the 18th fairway. The side door slid open before the wheels even touched down. A colonel climbed out, gripping a black case handcuffed to his wrist. 2 military police trailed behind him, sweeping the crowd, the balconies, the service entrance with their eyes. He never glanced at Chloe. He walked directly toward me. My father, seated near the alumni board, pushed himself up with both hands braced on his cane. "What is the meaning of this?" he barked. "Rebecca, what have you done this time?" I was wearing a plain navy dress. No ribbons, no rank insignia, nothing that would explain why an Army aircraft had just dropped onto a high school reunion in Cedar Ridge, Colorado. Colonel Marcus Ellison halted 3 feet away, snapped to attention, and saluted. "Colonel Cole," he said, "Cyber Command has confirmed the breach. The Joint Chiefs need your read on it right now." Somewhere behind me, a phone hit the stone patio and shattered. Chloe's smile drained away 1 degree at a time. The black case Ellison carried held proof of an assault on the United States. The sealed envelope tucked inside my clutch held proof of a different assault, one my own family had been running for 23 years. My father looked at me as though I had transformed into someone else entirely. I hadn't changed a bit. He had simply run out of shadows to hide me in. Before I explain how my sister wrote my name out of my own school's history, how my father helped her turn that fiction into the official record, and why a federal officer showed up holding evidence they themselves had once mailed to him, you need to understand one thing about the Coles. In that household, being loved and being useful were treated as the same currency. Chloe was useful because she made our father look accomplished. I was useful because I had trained myself to be easy to ignore. I grew up in Cedar Ridge, a mining town wedged between dark pine forests and mountains that turned violet just before the first snow. Our house sat directly behind my father's law office, a squat brick building with brass lettering on the glass door, Franklin Cole, attorney at law. Everyone in town trusted him. He represented ranchers, school officials, half the town council. He gave to the library fund, chaired the hospital board, and stood by the church doors on Sundays shaking hands like a man campaigning for an office nobody had ever created. At home, he set the emotional thermostat for every room in the house. When he was satisfied, the whole place seemed to exhale. When he was disappointed, no one dared lift a fork. My mother, Anne, learned to read his moods by the sound his briefcase made hitting the floor. She drifted quietly through our kitchen, always smelling faintly of vanilla lotion and the mint she dried on the windowsill. She had her own private dialect for showing love, a clean towel left outside my door after a run in the rain, a freshly sharpened pencil set beside my scholarship paperwork, a small lamp left burning in the kitchen while I studied past midnight. She never once said, "Your father is wrong." Instead, she said, "Finish what you started." I was 3 years older than Chloe. I read early, ran cross-country, sat first chair in violin, and had my mother's broken radio disassembled and working again before I turned 13. Chloe, meanwhile, understood people, and that skill mattered far more to our father. By 10, she already knew exactly when to laugh at his jokes. By 12, she could guess which dress he wanted her in before he said a word. By 14, she could walk into any room and instantly become whatever the most powerful person there needed her to be. I never learned that trick. At the county debate finals, I beat a senior from Denver in the last round, my hands smelling of index card ink, my voice scraped raw. My history teacher, Mr. Walters, shook my hand afterward and told my father I had real command presence. My father was already looking toward the parking lot. "Rebecca mistakes preparation for personality," he said. 6 months later, Chloe placed in a regional speech contest, and my father booked out the private dining room at Marlowe's Steakhouse to celebrate. The night my West Point appointment arrived, snow was hammering the kitchen windows like handfuls of thrown rice. I set the envelope down beside my father's plate. He opened it, skimmed the first page, and folded it shut again. "You applied without consulting me. I told you I was applying. Telling me is not the same as consulting me." My mother stood at the sink with her back to the room. Chloe stared at the letter. "Do women even do combat jobs?" she asked. My father let out a short laugh. "Rebecca has always enjoyed the hard way of proving something ordinary." I waited for him to say he was proud of me. The refrigerator hummed. A truck rumbled by out on the highway. My mother dried the same plate twice. Nothing more came. Later that night, I found the envelope slipped back under my bedroom door. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, 5 words. Go before they make you stay. I left Cedar Ridge at 18. Not chasing glory, just chasing air. West Point stripped away at every soft excuse I'd been hiding behind. Hudson River wind cut straight through gray wool. Boots wore raw patches into my heels. Upper-class cadets found every weakness I had buried under achievement and shouted it out loud for everyone to hear. I loved every brutal minute of it. The standards were merciless, but at least they were honest. A 5-mile run didn't care how charming my sister was. A weapons qualification didn't care whether my father approved. A tactical problem didn't shift shape just because a man at our dinner table wanted me smaller. I graduated near the top of my class and commissioned into military intelligence. My father showed up to the ceremony only because my mother insisted. He shook my hand and said, "This will read well in the firm's Christmas letter." My mother hugged me so hard she wrinkled the uniform, her cheek pressed against my collar. "Finish what you started," she whispered. The Army sent me to places my family would later flatten into the vague phrase somewhere overseas. First stop, a concrete operations center outside Baghdad, where dust seeped through sealed doors and coated everything, our teeth included. We tracked militia networks, supply lines, coded radio chatter. One night, the same odd phrase surfaced across 3 unrelated transmissions. Blue Lantern. The analyst logged it as idiomatic noise. I noticed something else. Each transmission landed exactly 11 minutes before an attack. I ordered a route change for a medical convoy heading toward Balad. My major pushed back. "You're building a whole decision on 2 words. 3 attacks are building the decision," I told him. We rerouted. An IED leveled the bridge on the original road 9 minutes later. Marcus Ellison, a captain back then, stood beside me as the live feed went white with smoke. "You just saved 32 people, he said. "We moved some trucks." "No," he said. "You saw the hand before it reached for the knife." He was the first officer who ever understood how my mind actually worked. I didn't need the loudest voice in the room. I needed the missing piece of the pattern. Years later, in a windowless room under a NATO facility, I caught a cyber intrusion buried inside routine maintenance traffic. The intruders had copied an allied contractor's spelling mistakes perfectly, but not his rhythm. He always uploaded before lunch, and these files kept landing at 2:17 in the morning. That one gap exposed a network already sitting inside 3 defense systems. We called the response Ghost Viper. It never made a single headline, and neither did I. We shut the intrusion down, but 3 officers died during the field phase. I was the one who signed the authorization sending them forward. Their families got folded flags and answers thin enough to see through. I got my next assignment. That's what command sometimes costs. You carry names nobody's allowed to say out loud, and the world mistakes your silence for absence. I missed my mother's final birthday because of Ghost Viper. She died 7 months later of pancreatic cancer while I was stationed in Poland. My father told the hospital not to bother contacting my unit. He didn't see the point in interrupting national security over something inevitable. Chloe sat at her bedside. I made it home 2 days after the funeral. The house smelled like lilies and cold coffee. My mother's chair had already been hauled out of the kitchen. Chloe was busy sorting sympathy cards by importance. My father handed me a cardboard box. "Your mother kept all this military stuff," he said. "I've got no use for it." Inside were every letter I'd ever mailed home, 3 photographs of me in uniform, my West Point graduation program, and my old debate certificate, still faintly wrinkled from years pressed between 2 cookbooks. My mother had saved everything. My father had displayed nothing. I carried the box out onto the porch. He followed me. "You chose this career," he said. "Don't come home expecting the rest of us to rearrange our lives around your regrets." I looked at him. My regret was never the career. His face went blank, like the sentence had refused to obey him. That was the day I stopped waiting for my father to ever understand me. Everything I'd trained for, everything I'd survived, had been preparation for a room I hadn't walked into yet. 23 years after graduation, Jefferson High announced a reunion at Aspen Grove Resort, organized by a committee Chloe chaired. She had followed our father into law, moved through federal prosecution, and had just accepted a senior post in the Justice Department's Cyber Oversight Division, respected in public, still weaponizing family history in private. My invitation arrived stripped of my military title. That part didn't sting. The note tucked inside did. Rebecca, Dad would appreciate it if you kept your work stories vague. Most of the guests built real civilian careers, and classified hints can come across as attention-seeking. Chloe. I read it standing at my kitchen counter in Washington. Beside it sat a sealed envelope I'd pulled from my mother's cardboard box years earlier and never opened, because the front bore my father's handwriting. For Rebecca, not to be released. Underneath, in blue ink, my mother had added, "Keep this. One day they may force you to use it." I slid the envelope into my clutch. At the reunion, the lobby chandelier threw light across the marble floor in every direction. The concierge handed me a plain name badge. Rebecca Cole, no career, no organization, nothing to distinguish me. Other guests carried titles under their names: Dr. Hartman, Senator Price, Chloe Cole, Department of Justice. I smiled at the concierge and walked in. My table, number 14, sat right beside the service doors. My entry in the reunion booklet had no biography, just blank space where the paragraph should have been. Jason Hart found me before dinner started. He'd been my boyfriend senior year, before West Point convinced him I'd rejected him personally. "Becca," he said, swirling a glass of scotch, "still pushing paper for the Army?" "I still work," he laughed. "Always so mysterious. Chloe says you never made it into anything operational." 2 more classmates drifted over. One asked if I'd been a clerk, another guessed logistics. Chloe arrived in her red dress and air-kissed my cheek. Rebecca never cared much about climbing, she told the group. She prefers support roles. "That's generous of you," Jason said. My father sat at the head table under the reunion banner, his shoulders bent by age but his authority intact. He raised his glass in my direction without a hint of a smile. Not a greeting, an order. "Behave." I sat down. Mr. Walters, my old history teacher, stopped by my table mid-dinner. His hair had thinned, but his eyes hadn't changed a bit. "I still remember your paper on asymmetric warfare," he said. "That was a long time ago." Good work outlasts attention. He studied me a moment longer. "I've read a few things over the years where the names were blacked out. The thinking sounded familiar." Before I could respond, Chloe called him up to the stage. He touched the back of my chair on his way past. "Some of us always knew you hadn't disappeared." That sentence gave me more comfort than he'll ever know. Dinner wound down, the lights dimmed, a slideshow lit the screen with a curated highlight reel. Chloe at Harvard, Chloe outside the Justice Department building, Chloe shaking hands with officials. My graduation photo flickered by for less than 2 seconds, captioned Rebecca Cole, Army Administration. My father nodded approvingly. The first humiliation of the night had been private. The second one had witnesses. The third arrived with a microphone. Chloe accepted the Distinguished Alumni Award to a wave of applause. She thanked our teachers, our town, and our father. "Dad taught us that leadership means showing up when people need you," she said. "Some of us choose the spotlight. Others find comfort staying in the background." Her eyes landed on mine. "My sister Rebecca is here tonight. She walked away from a promising pre-law track to join the Army. Not every choice turns into a success story, but every choice teaches us something." A ripple of careful laughter moved through the ballroom. Jason stood and raised his glass. "To Chloe. Proof that leading from the front beats hiding out in a supply office." The laugh that followed was louder. My father didn't laugh. He did something worse. He clapped. I kept my hands folded in my lap. Chloe kept going. "Our reunion committee reviewed the alumni records this year," she announced, "and found several unverified references to sensitive military work tied to Rebecca's name. To protect the integrity of the school, we've removed those claims until they can be confirmed." There it was. No longer a family jab, but institutional erasure with an official seal behind it. She held up a printed resolution. "The Alumni Board has also referred the matter to the appropriate federal contacts since impersonating senior military authority is a serious offense." A few heads snapped toward me. Jason lowered his glass. My father leaned into the microphone at his table. "My daughter has always struggled to accept ordinary limits," he said. "This is painful, but it's necessary." The room stopped feeling amused. It started feeling hungry. Phones came up around the room. A sheriff's deputy walked over to table 14, apology written across his face. "Ms. Cole, we've had a request to verify your identity." Chloe had scripted every beat of this. She was expecting anger, denial, a scene she could describe later as proof she'd been right. Instead, I opened my clutch and rested my fingers on the sealed envelope. My encrypted phone lit up with one line from Allison. "Extraction authorized 6 minutes." I turned the phone face down. The deputy stopped in front of me. Ma'am, do you carry military identification? Yes. Chloe raised the resolution higher. Not until the board records its finding. We've spent years protecting this school from false claims. Rebecca doesn't get to hide behind secrecy forever. My father cracked his cane against the floor. Answer your sister. I looked straight at him. You should have asked before she signed it. My voice barely carried across the table. He heard it anyway. If you've ever watched your own family rewrite you into evidence for their version of events, you know what I mean when I say I spent years believing silence was protecting my dignity. Standing in that ballroom, I finally understood that silence also hands dishonest people all the room they need to build a wall around your name. The lights outside flickered. A low tremor rattled the water glasses. Guests turned toward the windows. Chloe kept talking. This performance is exactly the problem. Rebecca shows up, dodges reasonable questions, and expects everyone to just accept she's important because she drops classified hints. The tremor turned into a roar. Napkins lifted off the patio tables and scattered. The ballroom doors blew open under the force of the wind. Guests rushed toward the glass. The Black Hawk dropped over the fairway, landing lights slicing through the dark. My father rose to his feet. Chloe lost a heel crossing the patio. Colonel Ellison stepped down from the aircraft carrying the chained case and stopped in front of me, saluting. Colonel Cole, Cyber Command has confirmed the breach. The Joint Chiefs need your assessment immediately. Nobody clapped. The truth was too big for applause, not at first. It moved through the crowd in small physical details, Jason's mouth falling open with nothing coming out, the deputy stepping backward, the alumni chair lowering Chloe's resolution, my father's cane trembling against the stone patio. Chloe held her shoulders square. This proves nothing, she said quickly. Anyone can stage a dramatic entrance. Rebecca, this is reckless. You can't bring military assets to a private event because you're embarrassed. Ellison turned to face her. Ma'am, this aircraft was diverted under operational authority. Colonel Cole commands the Joint Task Force responding to an active national security intrusion. Chloe's voice dropped to almost nothing. Colonel? A brigadier general stepped out of the helicopter behind him. Naomi Grant, who had overseen Ghost Viper, walking toward us bareheaded, rain darkening the shoulders of her uniform. Colonel Cole, she said, we need the fulcrum assessment. That single word hit Chloe harder than any rank could have. Her own office at Justice knew the name fulcrum. It appeared in highly restricted briefings as the designation for the officer coordinating military response across compromised Allied systems. She had discussed my own work with me without ever knowing it was mine. General Grant turned to face the crowd. For operational reasons, Colonel Rebecca Cole's service record has remained partially sealed for 17 years. What can be said publicly is that her decisions have prevented attacks against American personnel, Allied governments, and civilian infrastructure. Mr. Walters murmured beside me. I told you. Good work outlasts attention. Chloe's fingers tightened around her resolution. My father finally found his voice. Rebecca, why was your family never told? I looked at him. You were told. I pulled the envelope from my clutch. My mother's blue handwriting faced him directly, and his expression changed instantly. Not surprise, recognition. I handed the envelope to General Grant. My mother told me to keep this. The general broke the seal. Inside were copies of letters my command had sent my father over the years. Invitations to promotion ceremonies, official family notifications, a citation for a classified act of valor with the sensitive sections redacted, a request that he attend a private Pentagon recognition after Ghost Viper. Every single one signed. Received by Franklin Cole. Beneath the stack sat a handwritten statement from my mother, which the general read aloud. My husband has been hiding Rebecca's military correspondence because he believes he's